In a small town, a 79-year-old veteran named Helen Lynette Carter pulled into a gas station. She had served her country as a helicopter pilot during the Vietnam War. With her silver hair and bright eyes, she was a picture of strength and courage. Lenny was proud of her service and wore her veteran cap with honor. As she stepped out of her car, she noticed a group of bikers gathered nearby. They were members of the Shadow Vipers motorcycle gang, known for their tough demeanor and intimidating presence. The sound of their loud laughter filled the air, and their heavy leather jackets made them look even more imposing. Lenny approached the gas pump, determined to fill her tank and continue on her way. But as she began to pump gas, she felt the weight of their stares on her. The bikers had turned their attention to her, whispering among themselves. It was clear they saw her as an easy target, someone they could bully without consequence. One of the bikers stepped forward, towering over Lenny. He smirked, his friend snickering behind him. Lenny felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but she stood tall. She had faced much worse in her life than a group of bullies at a gas station. Before we continue with the story, you should comment where you are watching from. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. We have another episode for you tomorrow. Memories of flying through enemy lines flashed in her mind, reminding her of the bravery she carried within. The biker made a comment meant to belittle her, but Lenny didn't flinch. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, filling her tank. The sound of the gas pumping was almost soothing amidst the tension building around her. She could feel the gang's energy shift. They were not used to someone standing up to them. As Lenny finished filling up, she turned to face them directly. Her heart raced, but she held her ground. The bikers exchanged glances, surprised by her defiance. In that moment, Lenny understood that this was not just about gas or a simple encounter, it was about standing up against bullying in any form. The bikers might have thought they could intimidate her, but they were about to learn that true strength comes from within. With determination in her eyes and a steady voice, Lenny prepared to show them that no one should ever feel small or powerless, regardless of age or appearance. What happened next would change everything for both Lenny and the gang members who underestimated her resolve. Lenny stood tall, her heart pounding but her spirit unyielding. The bikers shifted uneasily, their laughter fading as they realized she was not backing down. Around them, other patrons at the gas station watched with wide eyes, some whispering to each other. They were curious, but hesitant to intervene. Lenny felt their gaze, a mix of support and fear, and she knew she had to act. With a deep breath, Lenny pulled out her phone. She dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang only once before a familiar voice answered. She called him Steel Mike Johnson, a former soldier she had rescued during her time in Vietnam. Memories flooded back of the day she had flown into danger to save him and others. She remembered Mike's gratitude and how they had forged a bond that lasted through the years. As she spoke into the phone, Lenny felt a rush of determination. She explained her situation quickly, knowing that Mike would understand the urgency. He listened intently, and she could hear the wheels turning in his mind. Lenny knew he would not hesitate to help. After hanging up, Lenny turned back to the bikers. They were still watching her, their confidence shaken, but not gone. The tension in the air thickened as Lenny waited for Mike's arrival. She could feel the eyes of the other patrons on her, some hopeful, others anxious. Minutes felt like hours as she stood there, unwavering. Then, in the distance, the rumble of motorcycles grew louder. One by one, they appeared, veterans from different branches of the military who had served alongside Lenny or had heard of her bravery. They rode in formation, their disciplined presence commanding respect. As they parked their bikes and dismounted, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The Shadow Vipers looked on with uncertainty as these veterans approached with purpose. Each one wore their own stories of courage and sacrifice on their sleeves, and their camaraderie was palpable. Mike led the group, his tall frame and strong demeanor radiating confidence. He walked straight up to Lenny and nodded in recognition of her strength. The bikers shifted nervously as they realized they were no longer facing just one woman, but a united front of veterans ready to stand against bullying. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Lenny felt a surge of pride as her fellow veterans surrounded her, forming a protective barrier against the gang. The bikers exchanged worried glances. They had underestimated her resolve and now faced a force they could not intimidate. Lenny took a step forward again, flanked by her comrades who stood ready to support her. She felt empowered by their presence and knew that together they could send a powerful message: bullying would not be tolerated. The bikers hesitated, their bravado fading as they realized they were outnumbered and outmatched by those who had faced real danger together. The tension hung thick in the air as everyone waited for what would happen next. In that moment of silence, Lenny understood that this was more than just about her. It was about every person who had ever been bullied or made to feel small. With renewed strength from her fellow veterans standing beside her, she prepared to confront the gang once more. The bikers were about to learn that true courage comes not just from size or strength, but from standing together in solidarity against injustice. Lenny stood firm, surrounded by her fellow veterans, ready to take action. The bikers had backed down, but Lenny knew this was just the beginning. She gathered the veterans in a nearby corner of the gas station, their faces serious and focused. They needed a plan to address not only her confrontation, but also the larger issue of the Shadow Vipers and their bullying tactics. Lenny began to speak, outlining her thoughts. The veterans listened intently as she shared what she had learned about the gang's activities in the area. They had been extorting local businesses, demanding money in exchange for protection. Many shop owners were afraid to speak up, fearing retaliation from the gang. Lenny felt a fire ignite within her. They could not let this continue. As they strategized, ideas flowed freely. Each veteran brought their own experiences and skills to the table. They discussed ways to gather evidence against the gang and how to support local businesses that were suffering under the gang's threats. Lenny emphasized that they needed to act quickly but carefully. The element of surprise would be crucial. The conversation shifted as Lenny suggested reaching out to local authorities for help. The veterans nodded in agreement, recognizing that they needed more than just their own strength to tackle this problem. They decided to invite Police Chief Thompson, a respected figure in the community who had always supported veterans. With a plan in place, Lenny made the call. Chief Thompson arrived shortly after, his expression serious as he listened to Lenny and her fellow veterans explain the situation. He was shocked but also impressed by their determination. The chief understood that this was not just about one woman standing up to bullies, it was about protecting an entire community from criminal activity. Together, they discussed how they could work as a team. Chief Thompson outlined some legal strategies and resources available to them. He encouraged the veterans to document any incidents they witnessed involving the Shadow Vipers and assured them that police support would be there when needed. As they talked, Lenny felt a sense of hope growing within her. The community was coming together, united against a common enemy. This was not just her fight anymore, it was a fight for everyone who had been bullied or threatened. They set up a plan for surveillance of the gang's activities and decided on a day when they would confront them with evidence of their wrongdoing. The anticipation built as they prepared for what lay ahead. Each veteran felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to protect their town and stand against injustice. Lenny knew that this would not be easy, but she also knew they were stronger together. With each passing moment, her resolve grew stronger. They were no longer just individuals, they were a united front ready to take on whatever challenges came their way. As they wrapped up their meeting, Lenny looked around at her comrades. She felt grateful for their support and courage. Together, they would show the Shadow Vipers that bullying would not win in their town. They were ready for battle, armed with determination and a plan that would change everything. As the days passed, the tension in the town grew. The Shadow Vipers, feeling threatened by the united front of veterans and community members, escalated their violence. One evening, they set fire to a beloved veteran-owned bakery. The flames lit up the night sky, and the smell of smoke filled the air. The community was devastated. This was not just an attack on a business, it was an attack on their spirit. Lenny felt a surge of anger and sadness. She knew they had to act quickly. The veterans gathered once more, their resolve hardened by the gang's actions. They discussed how to protect their town and support those who had been harmed. Lenny reminded them that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. They were fighting for their community, their friends, and their shared history. With determination in her heart, Lenny devised a plan to expose the gang's drug trafficking network, which she had learned about through her research and conversations with locals. This was not just about intimidation, it was about dismantling the gang's operations once and for all. The veterans split into teams, each assigned a specific area of town to monitor. They positioned themselves strategically at key locations where they suspected gang activity would occur. Lenny coordinated with Chief Thompson, who provided them with resources and backup if needed. The community rallied around them, offering support in any way they could. On the day of the operation, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Lenny felt a mix of excitement and fear. She knew that this could be a turning point in their fight against the Shadow Vipers. As they took their positions, she reminded everyone to stay alert and focused. The hours passed slowly as they waited for signs of activity. Suddenly, a few members of the Shadow Vipers appeared in a van near one of the locations where drugs were rumored to be exchanged. Lenny's heart raced as she signaled to her team to prepare for action. As the bikers unloaded suspicious packages from the van, Lenny felt adrenaline surge through her veins. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. She gave the signal, and her team moved into action. They surrounded the area, cutting off any escape routes for the gang members. The confrontation was intense as Lenny and her fellow veterans confronted the bikers head-on. The bikers were taken by surprise. They had not expected such organized resistance from the community. Tensions peaked as words were exchanged, but Lenny remained calm and focused. In that moment, she realized that this was not just about fighting back, it was about standing up for what was right. The veterans stood together like a wall of strength, ready to protect their town at all costs. As chaos erupted around them, Chief Thompson arrived with police backup, ready to assist in apprehending the gang members. The bikers quickly realized they were outmatched and began to retreat, but it was too late. The evidence they had gathered would expose their illegal activities once and for all. Lenny felt a wave of relief wash over her as she saw police officers moving in to make arrests. The community had come together in a powerful way, showing that they would not be intimidated any longer. This confrontation marked a turning point. The Shadow Vipers would no longer rule over their town with fear. As the dust settled and order was restored, Lenny looked around at her fellow veterans and community members who had stood by her side throughout this ordeal. They had shown incredible resilience in the face of adversity, proving that courage comes in many forms. In that moment of victory, Lenny knew that they had not only protected their town, but also inspired others to stand up against bullying and injustice wherever it reared its ugly head. Together, they had made a difference that would resonate throughout their community for years to come. As the police moved in to apprehend the Shadow Vipers, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Lenny stood among her fellow veterans, her heart racing with adrenaline and anticipation. Just as the situation seemed poised for a dramatic climax, she felt an urge to lighten the mood. In a moment of inspiration, she called out something unexpected, a quip that broke through the seriousness of the scene. "Looks like we're not going down without a fight. We've got more fireworks than a 4th of July parade." The words came out before she could second-guess herself. A few of her comrades chuckled, and even some of the onlookers cracked smiles. Lenny knew that humor could diffuse tension, and she hoped it would work here. Just then, as if on cue, a loud bang erupted nearby. A small group of children had been setting off fireworks for their own celebration, and one of them had accidentally launched a firework too close to the action. The bright colors shot into the sky, bursting into a dazzling display above them. The unexpected explosion startled everyone, including the gang members. For a brief moment, confusion reigned. The bikers looked up in surprise as colorful sparks rained down around them. Some instinctively ducked, unsure if they were under attack or witnessing a celebration. Lenny seized the opportunity. She pointed at the fireworks and shouted with laughter, "See? Even the sky knows we're not backing down." The laughter spread through the crowd, breaking the intensity of the moment. Even some of the police officers couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. The Shadow Vipers were momentarily disarmed by the unexpected turn of events. They exchanged bewildered glances, their tough facade cracking under the weight of laughter and disbelief. In that instant, Lenny's humor had transformed a potentially explosive confrontation into something lighter. The bikers hesitated, their bravado faltering as they realized they were not just facing angry veterans, but a community that could find joy even in chaos. As the fireworks continued to pop and sparkle overhead, Lenny felt a surge of confidence wash over her. She knew this was their moment to shine, not just as veterans, but as members of a community that refused to be intimidated. The laughter echoed around them, creating an atmosphere of unity and strength. With renewed energy, Lenny rallied her fellow veterans once more. They moved forward together, ready to support each other and confront the gang members who had caused so much pain in their town. As the last firework fizzled out in the night sky, Lenny felt empowered by what had just happened. She realized that humor could be a powerful weapon against fear and bullying. It reminded everyone present that they were stronger together and that no one should ever feel small or powerless. The bikers began to retreat as confusion turned into retreat, realizing they were losing control over the situation they had tried to dominate. The community stood strong behind Lenny and her fellow veterans, united in their determination to protect their town from those who sought to harm it. In that moment of unexpected joy amidst chaos, Lenny knew they had turned a corner. They were not just fighting against bullying, they were celebrating their strength and unity as a community ready to stand tall against any challenge that came their way. As the dust settled and the last of the fireworks faded into the night, the community began to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The shadow vipers, once a source of fear and intimidation, were now in retreat. The police moved in swiftly, arresting those who had caused chaos and destruction. Lenny watched as the gang members were taken away, their bravado stripped away by the unity and strength of the community they had underestimated. In the days that followed, the Shadow Vipers disbanded. Their power had been broken, and former members began to seek redemption. Some reached out to Lenny and her fellow veterans, wanting to make amends for their past actions. They realized that they had been part of something destructive and wanted to change their lives for the better. Lenny welcomed them with open arms, understanding that everyone deserves a chance to start anew. As Riverstone began to heal from the turmoil, Lenny reflected on her journey. She thought about how far she had come from that day at the gas station when she first faced down the bikers. It was not just her bravery that had made a difference, it was the support of her fellow veterans and the entire community that had rallied around her. Together, they had shown that strength lies in unity and that no one should ever feel alone in their fight against bullying. One sunny afternoon, Lenny returned to the gas station where it all began. It was now a symbol of resilience and hope for Riverstone. The community had come together to repaint it, adding bright colors and signs of support for local businesses. As she filled her car with gas, she felt a deep sense of pride. This place, once a site of intimidation, had transformed into a beacon of courage. Lenny smiled as she watched families come and go, children playing nearby, and neighbors chatting happily. She knew that true strength comes from standing together against intimidation. As she finished pumping gas, Lenny looked up at the sky, feeling grateful for everything that had happened. She understood now that every challenge faced could lead to growth and connection if approached with an open heart. The battle against bullying was not just a fight, it was a journey toward understanding and healing. With renewed purpose, Lenny drove away from the gas station, knowing that Riverstone was stronger than ever. The community had proven that they would not back down in the face of adversity. They would continue to support one another and stand tall against any challenges that lay ahead. In her heart, Lenny carried the lessons learned from this experience. Courage is not just about facing fears, but also about lifting others up along the way. As she navigated through the streets of Riverstone, she felt a sense of belonging and pride in being part of such a resilient community. The story of Lenny's fight against bullying would be told for years to come, a reminder that together they could overcome anything. And so, as she drove into the sunset, Lenny knew that this was not just an ending, it was a new beginning for herself and for everyone in Riverstone who believed in standing strong together. Lenny's story spread throughout Riverstone, inspiring many. As the community healed, local news outlets began to take an interest in the events that had unfolded. They wanted to understand more about the shadow vipers and why gangs like them engaged in such destructive behavior. To shed light on this issue, a criminologist was invited for an interview. The criminologist explained that motorcycle gangs often operate under a strict hierarchy. At the top are leaders who make decisions and enforce rules. Below them are various ranks of members who carry out tasks. This structure allows gangs to maintain control and discipline among their members. The criminologist noted that many gang members come from difficult backgrounds, seeking a sense of belonging or power that they may not find elsewhere. The conversation turned to the motivations behind extortion and intimidation. The criminologist shared that gangs often target local businesses because they see them as easy prey. Many business owners are afraid to stand up to gangs, fearing retaliation. This fear is what allows gangs like the Shadow Vipers to thrive. They exploit this vulnerability by demanding protection money, creating an environment of fear that keeps businesses compliant. Lenny listened intently as the criminologist discussed how gangs often use intimidation tactics to establish dominance in a community. They may engage in violent acts or threats to send a message that they are not to be crossed. This behavior not only harms individuals but also disrupts the fabric of the community. It creates an atmosphere where people feel unsafe and isolated. The criminologist emphasized that breaking this cycle requires community involvement and support. When people come together, as Riverstone did, they can challenge gang influence and reclaim their neighborhoods. Lenny felt proud knowing that her actions had sparked this change. As the interview continued, the criminologist highlighted the importance of understanding these dynamics to prevent future gang activity. Education and awareness were key in empowering communities to stand up against intimidation. Lenny realized that her journey was part of a larger narrative about resilience and courage in the face of adversity. The discussion wrapped up with a call to action for communities everywhere. The criminologist urged viewers to recognize that they have the power to make a difference by supporting one another and refusing to let fear dictate their lives. Lenny felt inspired by these words, knowing her community had already taken significant steps toward healing and unity. With this newfound knowledge, Lenny was even more determined to continue her efforts in Riverstone. She understood that while their battle against the Shadow Vipers had been won, there was still work to be done in ensuring lasting change. The interview served as a reminder that awareness and education were essential tools in combating gang influence and fostering a safe environment for everyone. As Lenny reflected on the insights shared during the interview, she felt hopeful for Riverstone's future. The community had shown that they could overcome challenges together, proving that strength lies not just in numbers, but in solidarity and support for one another. With each passing day, she knew they were building a brighter tomorrow for themselves and future generations. To gain insight into the emotional and mental impacts of gang violence and community resilience, a psychologist was invited for an interview. The psychologist began by discussing the concept of trauma bonding, which often occurs among gang members and their victims. This bond can form through shared experiences of fear, violence, and loyalty. Gang members may feel a strong connection to one another, believing they are part of a family that protects them. However, this bond can also trap individuals in a cycle of violence and intimidation, making it difficult for them to break free. Lenny listened carefully as the psychologist explained how trauma bonding could lead to a distorted sense of loyalty. Gang members might feel guilty or afraid to leave, fearing retaliation from their peers or feeling they would be abandoning their family. This emotional entanglement complicates the process of seeking help or redemption. The conversation then shifted to the community members who had initially remained silent or inactive during the gang's reign of terror. The psychologist spoke about the guilt many felt for not intervening sooner. They had witnessed bullying and intimidation but were paralyzed by fear. This guilt could weigh heavily on their conscience, leading to feelings of shame and regret. Lenny reflected on her own journey and how she had once felt hesitant to confront the bikers. She understood now that fear could silence even the strongest voices. The psychologist emphasized that overcoming this guilt was crucial for healing. Community members needed to recognize that they were not alone in their feelings and that it was never too late to take action. The discussion highlighted the importance of community support in addressing these psychological effects. The psychologist encouraged open conversations about fear and guilt, allowing individuals to share their experiences without judgment. Healing could begin when people felt safe enough to express their emotions and learn from one another. As the interview continued, Lenny felt a sense of hope. She realized that understanding these psychological dynamics could empower Riverstone residents to move forward together. By acknowledging their fears and guilt, they could create a stronger, more united community. The psychologist concluded by stressing that resilience comes not only from facing challenges, but also from learning how to support one another through emotional struggles. Lenny understood that her fight against bullying was about more than just confronting bullies. It was about fostering an environment where everyone felt valued and heard. With this newfound knowledge, Lenny felt inspired to continue her efforts in Riverstone. She envisioned community gatherings where people could come together to share their stories, heal from past traumas, and build connections based on trust and understanding. As she drove through the familiar streets of Riverstone after the interview, Lenny felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that by addressing the psychological effects of bullying and violence, they could strengthen their community even further. Together, they would create a safe haven where everyone could thrive without fear. Lenny's journey was far from over. It was evolving into something greater than she had ever imagined. The lessons learned from her experience would guide her as she worked alongside her neighbors to build a brighter future for Riverstone, one rooted in compassion, understanding, and resilience against adversity. Local news outlets also arranged an interview with a legal expert to discuss the implications of the gang-related events that had unfolded. The expert was well-versed in law enforcement and community rights, and the conversation promised to shed light on the legal landscape surrounding gang activity and community responses. The legal expert began by explaining how law enforcement can effectively address gang-related crimes. He emphasized that strong collaboration between police and the community is crucial. When residents report suspicious activities and work with law enforcement, it helps build cases against gangs. The expert noted that proactive policing strategies, such as community outreach programs and educational workshops, could empower citizens to take part in their own safety without resorting to violence. Lenny listened intently as the expert discussed the importance of evidence in prosecuting gang members. He explained that law enforcement needs clear documentation of illegal activities to take action. This could include photographs, witness statements, and video recordings. The more information the community provides, the stronger the case against gangs becomes. The conversation then shifted to the issue of consent in community actions against gangs. The legal expert highlighted that while community members have the right to protect themselves, they must do so within the boundaries of the law. Vigilantism, taking the law into one's own hands, can lead to serious legal consequences for individuals involved. It could create a cycle of violence and retaliation that ultimately harms the community. Lenny felt a mix of concern and understanding as she absorbed this information. She realized that while her community had come together to stand against bullying, it was essential to do so in a way that was safe and lawful. The legal expert reinforced that communities should focus on working with law enforcement rather than acting independently, which could complicate matters further. The discussion also touched on societal implications of vigilantism. The expert explained that when communities feel they must take justice into their own hands, it often signals a breakdown in trust between residents and law enforcement. This can lead to fear and division rather than unity and safety. Lenny recognized how vital it was for Riverstone to maintain open lines of communication with police to foster a sense of security. As the interview progressed, Lenny felt inspired by the legal expert's insights. She understood that while fighting against bullying was important, it needed to be done thoughtfully and responsibly. She envisioned organizing community meetings where residents could learn about their rights, understand how to report crimes effectively, and discuss ways to support one another without crossing legal boundaries. The interview concluded with a call for communities like Riverstone to remain vigilant but also informed. The legal expert encouraged everyone to engage constructively with law enforcement while advocating for safety and justice within their neighborhoods. As Lenny drove home after the interview, she felt empowered by what she had learned. She knew that knowledge was key in overcoming fear and intimidation. With this understanding, she was determined to help her community navigate these challenges together, safely and legally. Lenny envisioned a future where Riverstone would not only stand strong against gangs, but also foster an environment of trust and cooperation between residents and law enforcement. This would ensure that everyone felt safe and supported while working toward a brighter future for all. Her journey was far from over,